Hi, everybody, and happy Monday. Today I'll be reading Chapter 6 from my novel Living Nightmare, which is Book 1 from the Other Side of Gifted series. In Chapter 5, we were given a little bit of Tobin's background, how strict her upbringing was. And in previous chapters, we met Ange, a fellow patient on the 4th floor ward at the Mental Institute, who considers Tobin her best friend. Ange recently found out that she had an uncle, which she was very happy to know. Chapter 6. Ange claims we're special. Gifted. I wish it were true. It would make everything okay. Or would it? I don't know. No, I do. It would be worse. Better we're screwed up. This way, there's the hope we can change. Tobin. The skeleton's boy's name was Tristan Watkins. He was 16 years old and battling anorexia nervosa because of his parents' pending divorce. The custody tug-of-war had turned him into a rope that was beginning to unravel, and he regained control by choosing not to eat. Ange whispered this information to Tobin during breakfast. Most of the patients were half asleep, sitting quietly while they ate, causing Ange's voice to carry. Fortunately, the patients who shared the table were more concerned with trying to keep their eyes open. One guy propped his head on a hand and promptly fell asleep. Tobin watched his elbow gradually sliding across the table. Ange, ever the morning person, was giddy as she confessed to eavesdropping on Tristan's session with Dr. Watts a few days ago. She also added her own opinion about his diagnosis. Yeah, he's skinny and got eating problems. Ange waved her hands as she spoke, sending a piece of egg flying off her fork. But that's not the real problem. Not why he's jittery like someone dumped bugs down his pants. Tobin covered a yawn with her hand. A nightmare of an office fire had left her voice hoarse, her throat dry and aching. Thinking the alarm was a drill, the employees of a gaming company had taken their time leaving, a decision they came to regret when smoke filled the staircase and flames devoured the walls around them. She woke with blisters on her hands. A man had stayed behind to make sure the office was empty. He didn't make it out. Ange flicked the egg off the table and leaned forward. Tobin could smell the orange juice on her breath. He's an aura reader. Know what that means? Since it's not real, nausea swirled in Tobin's stomach. No, and I don't care. The soggy cereal in front of her made her want to puke. She pushed it away. Bang! Ange let out a squeal, startling Tobin. The sleeping patient sat up, rubbing a red mark on his forehead. He glared at them. Ange shrugged at Tobin after the man laid his head on his crossed arms. Gonna tell you anyways, she said, shoving a forkful of scrambled eggs into her mouth. He sees auras. Super awesome power. She beamed at Tobin. He can tell who's a baddie and who's a goodie. That's why he's so skittish. He sees bad people but has to act like he doesn't. Poor boy. Nifty power, though. They both looked at the anorexic. Nurse Tiffany was talking to him, but he didn't seem interested. His focus was on his food. He took the tiniest sip of water, then a crumb-sized bite of dry toast before stirring his oatmeal. He didn't look strong enough to lift the spoon. If he could tell who was bad, shouldn't he get the strength to stop them? Tobin glanced at a patient sitting one table over. Okay then. What about him? She asked. Who? Tobin tilted her head toward the 20-something patient who was talking to himself. What's he doing? Talking to ghosts? Ange narrowed her gaze, taking him in. 5 seconds later, she laughed. No, silly. He's just crazy. You're funny when you know that. She shook her head at Tobin. After breakfast, Ange skipped off to the common room. Tobin stayed behind. She wasn't ready to deal with people staring at her. The cafeteria was less crowded. Most of the patients had finished eating. The high buzz of conversation and chewing faded. The kitchen staff began cleanups so they could prep for lunch. 2 staff members went around the tables to gather the trays and dishes left behind by lazy patients. Tobin watched them work. It calmed the rolling unease of her stomach. Tiffany followed the other patients out of the cafeteria, leaving the stragglers to Nurse Joe, who kept an eye out while helping a female kitchen staff member lift a bin of dirty dishes. Tobin's gaze went to Tristan. He was alone and painfully thin. How did his parents not notice? Why did they wait so long to get him help? He was jittery. Ange had that right. He scanned the room, eyes never staying long on anyone. He poked at his food but ate no more than 2 bites of toast. Did he not realize what he was doing to his body? Or had it happened so slowly he didn't see the weight slipping off? His face was narrow, cheekbones prominent above sunken cheeks. She could see his collarbones sticking out from the neckline of his shirt. One touch, and he'll shatter, she thought. He was that fragile. Their eyes met. His dark eyes widened. Tobin couldn't tell what color they were, but she read the shock in them. His gaze darted away. She frowned, watching him quickly shoot to his feet. He nearly fell over the bench seat. What the heck was his problem? June reached its end. Summer was about to hit its peak before its downward path to fall. Tobin gazed out her bedroom window at the forest, already picturing the leaves turning into shades of orange and red, browns and yellows. It would be a welcome change. She hated hot weather. A few times a week, she was forced into the fenced backyard for sun and fresh air, where 2 basketball nets, 3 wooden benches, and a hopscotch pattern painted in white on the ground were available for the patients. When Nurse Tiffany was supervising, jump ropes were also offered. Tobin never accepted. She walked the perimeter for exercise. Alongside the fence at one end of the mostly asphalt yard ran a wannabe garden, proudly displayed weeds and wilting cherry tomato plants. Being outside wasn't bad in the fall, but summer sucked. She disliked the humidity. There were no trees to provide shade, so on hot days she stayed outside for the required 30 minutes before returning indoors using the emergency exit staircases leading to the 4th floor. Today wasn't an outside day, and she should have been happy, but she wasn't. It was a big day, but not for her. Today was for Ange, who was about to meet her uncle for the first time. Ange was impatient to meet him. She shared her dissatisfaction with Tobin after each phone call. Uncle Travis had started phoning Ange the week after she learned of his existence, and these phone calls had become her favorite pastime. Each call lasted around 10 minutes, after which Ange would find Tobin and replay the conversation almost verbatim. Some kind of work crisis had prevented him from coming sooner, but the much-awaited day had finally arrived. Ange's excited giggles dragged Tobin toward the door in stocking feet. She hesitated in the doorway. Did she want to see Ange and Travis Barton meet? Tobin peeked out of her room, but couldn't see anything. No patients lurked outside their rooms. No nurses were checking anyone in. Where was everybody? When's he coming? Ange's voice boomed through the hallway, though Tobin couldn't see her. Someone answered, but their response was muffled. Why did she care that Ange's uncle was coming? It had nothing to do with her. The sound of approaching footsteps sent her hurrying to her bed. Less than a minute later, Ange danced into the room and threw herself at Tobin. Tobin grunted from the impact, stepping a foot back to keep them both from landing on their butts. He's coming, Toby. Today! Ange hugged Tobin, swaying. When she released her hold, she spun in a circle. I wish he was here already. Tobin couldn't help but smile at Ange. When's he expected? Oh, not for at least 30 minutes, she whined and flopped onto Tobin's bed. That soon? Are you kidding? 30 minutes is ages. Ange rolled on her side so she could stare at Tobin. Tell me a story. Huh? Ange patted the mattress. Sit. Tell me something. When did you come here? How old were you? What are your mommy and daddy like? Tobin sat but didn't look at Ange. I was 13. They brought me here on my birthday. The moment the words left her mouth, Tobin wished she hadn't spoken. There was a reason she didn't share her past with anyone. She should have lied, made something up, or shrugged the question off like she usually did. Time travel. If special powers existed, that's what she'd want to be able to do. Go back in time and distract Ange from asking. That means... Ange paused. Tobin saw that she was counting on her fingers. 6 years. 2 more than me. I didn't know that. Was Dr. D always your doctor? Were you always on 4? Interest lit up Ange's eyes like candles in a dark room. Tobin began to pick at a hangnail on her pinky finger. Dr. Dawson started working here 2 months before you came, she said. I've always been on the 4th floor. And your mommy and daddy, they don't come lots. Well, words surged up Tobin's throat, eager to escape the box she'd locked them in, when a sound from the hallway made Ange sit up. Good, Tobin swallowed. Oh my, is that him? Do you think he's here? Ange didn't wait for a response. She was halfway out the door before she finished speaking. There was no reason for Tobin to follow. Ange and Travis Barton should have their privacy after all. It would be awkward for them. They were strangers, she reminded herself, and she should mind her own business. Leave them alone. Ange didn't need her. Still, despite all her reasoning, Tobin found herself leaving the room to follow Ange a minute later. She found them outside the nurse's station. Dr. Dawson stood facing an older man with narrow shoulders and steel-colored hair. As Ange approached the pair, she let out a happy hi, causing both men to turn and face her. Tobin stayed in the background. Ange came to an abrupt stop right in front of Travis Barton. Tobin crept closer, unable to stay away. She hid behind the corner leading to Dr. Dawson's office, wanting to make sure Ange was okay. The girl was too sweet, she told herself. Too innocent. She had to make sure this Travis Barton wasn't going to disappoint her. His appearance didn't ease her angst. He was hard-looking, with a thin nose and an invisible upper lip, a thin gray mustache, and pale ice blue eyes. His hair was professionally styled, shorter on the sides. He wore a fancy black suit with a sharp tie and shiny shoes. He was clearly well off. What he wasn't, it seemed, was overjoyed to meet his niece. He studied the energy ball that was Ange. His smile looked insincere, Tobin thought, but then considered that maybe that was just her. She tended to be suspicious of people's motives, and she knew this about herself. Still, his expression didn't warm when Ange grabbed him in a spirited hug. He didn't return it, but instead looked stiff and uncomfortable. Sadly, Ange didn't seem to notice his reticence. She was too happy to sense the standoffish vibe Tobin could feel from where she hid. Hi, Uncle, Ange said, breaking off the hug. Dr. Dawson grinned from the sidelines before offering his office for their use. Tobin darted off down the hallway, not wanting to be caught spying. As she walked to the common room, frustration ate at her. Ange would later tell her all about the meeting, of course, but Tobin wanted to study Travis Barton more closely. When Ange left Manuel, Tobin wanted to be certain she would be cared for. After all, Ange was her only friend, and Tobin wanted to see her get the family she never had. The common room was busy, all tables occupied with patients drawing or playing games. One male patient was building a tower of cards, his shaky hands causing them to fall repeatedly. Few patients were talking, most ignored those around them. A black and white musical played loudly on the TV, droning out the mumbles of the patients. The music was nice, she thought. Melodic. Slow. Tobin watched the movie from the doorway for a while. The love seat was taken, but there was space on the hideous pink sofa. She pursed her lips. On one end of the sofa sat the purple-haired patient with the supposed wind power. On the other was a teenage boy with bad acne and shoulder-length blonde hair. The space between them was free. The middle sagged, causing anyone sitting there to lean inwards, as Tobin knew from experience. There was a rather awkward moment when she sat to the left of the sagging spot, only to find herself nearly resting on a male patient who took the middle seat. He was not pleased. Not worth it, she decided, and left the room. Tobin was writing in her dream journal when Ange found her. She finished her sentence, closed the book, and turned her attention to her smiling friend. "Did you have a nice meeting?" "Great!" Ange sat beside Tobin on the bed. "He's so handsome, wears fancy clothes." She let out a happy sigh. "He's going to bring me home when Dr. D says it's okay. Doc wants to talk to the staff he hired to help first." Tobin listened, adding hums or nods of agreement when needed. It didn't take much prodding to get Ange to share the meeting in detail. Travis Barton wanted to be called Mr. Barton. Ange decided Uncle was better. He was hiring a woman to help her fit in with normal people. His words. Ange said he promised to take her on outings when he could arrange them. When asked, Ange admitted that he didn't know when he'd be able to visit again. The entire time Ange spoke, her face was illuminated. Travis Barton represented everything she hoped for. Family. Ange wanted one desperately. Everyone had a family, but her. When Ange left to share the good news with others, Tobin's bedroom became too silent. That was the end of chapter 6, and next Monday it will be chapter 7. Until then, if you're curious about the book or about other writing that I've done, you could check out my website at dmdora.com. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.